Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Two Ways to Skin a Cat. My name is always Asmal. This is a show where we talk career experiences, entrepreneurship, and investments. The main aim is to show that there's more than one way to be successful other than just climbing the corporate ladder. We are live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the show will be available on podcast by tomorrow. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on that notification bell to get automatically notified when the next episode comes out. If you are joining us live, drop a one in the comments so that we know we're not talking to ourselves. And drop a two in the comments if you're watching the recording. My guest for this week is Katlego Matshego, Deputy Head of School of Finance and Accounting at the Independent Institute of Education. He was also a lecturer at Wits University, University of Johannesburg, and the University of Fort Hare. Katlego, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Hussein. Thank you for giving me the opportunity and the platform.
Let's jump straight into the meat of it.
Mm.
Tell us your story. Where do you come from? And even outside of work, who is Katlego Matshego? Give us that back story.
Yeah, so I'm from Pretoria, born and bred. Majority of the time I did most of the stuff in Pretoria. I'm from early schooling, from high school, even university, even articles for that matter. So most of my life I've known Pretoria. So I'm a chartered accountant. I decided to study accounting at the University of Pretoria, and it kind of took a little bit of time to get the undergrad under my belt, but eventually it happened, and ran in a couple of life challenging matters that prevented me from actually having to pursue my CTA full time. So I ended up having to do it part time with UNISA over 2 years. So I did the CTA 1 and CTA 2. And at the same time, I'm having to do my articles, which was not really an easy fit. But I think that journey actually taught me a lot about myself, that how resilient I am, and the fact that if I put my mind to doing something, actually nothing can stop me. And yeah, I mean, qualified. I think the interesting about that journey is that having to write both board exams in 1 year. So I wrote ITC in Jan 2014, passed it, and I was very obsessed with making sure that I passed that exam because I didn't want to be stuck in the loop of you fail, you come back in June again. Before you know it, you've attempted 6 times and then your CTA expires. So I was glad that happened. I think towards writing my second board exam, I was a little bit tired, and you can imagine studying CTA 1 in my first year of articles, studying CTA 2 in my second year of articles, and doing both board exams in my third year and final year of articles. So that was a little bit hard to balance. I didn't realize how much toll that has taken mentally, physically, emotionally. So I ended up failing APC. So I always say we were the guinea pigs where they tested out APC. So I failed. But the interesting that happened was I kind of knew that I failed. So I was less shocked when my results came out. Then 2015, I was more rejuvenated now. The article struggles is done. I can fully concentrate on attempting this thing and passing it. And I ended up being successful, and I qualified in 2016. And yeah, I think post that, even during my articles, even way before getting into the university space as a student, I kind of knew that I don't have the personality for a boardroom or for the corporate scene. I like the knowledge that it actually gives, but yeah, it's just not suited for me. So I always had this whole thing that I really want to get into academia, but obviously, you don't know how it is done. You don't know the roadmaps. And then, interesting thing, after I qualified, I was offered an assistant audit manager at the Auditor General. And within 2 months, I didn't last 2 months, I quit. And I just thought this is definitely not me. I am not I am like, I don't have the personality for me. I have the technical ability, no doubt. And then I just decided to join the learning and development space within the same organization, AGSA. And that was, I think, where I actually realized that's where my talents actually lie. And I need to pursue that route no matter what. So I spent 1 year, 6 months there. And then a mate of mine told me that, Sipugazi, that there is an opening actually at the University of Fort Hare. I'm keen to be a tech lecturer. And I've always liked techs. And obviously, you can imagine I've done everything in Gauteng. I've gone through them all. I know the corners. I know the people. Even within the corporate space, you kind of get the sense of, how people actually respond, how did they don't respond, how did they don't respond. So now I was tasked, I actually put it to myself, I'm saying, take a leap, take a jump. Got into the interview for Forte, and within the same week, I remember that day vividly, I was in Durban actually doing some training. And they just said, yeah, you are the next text lecturer within our department. HR will be in contact with you and everything else. And then, yeah, I packed my bags. And that's when I now started this whole academic route. And I must say, it was a bit scary in a sense of you don't, the whole landscape is that you become a chartered accountant, and the route is that you must be in corporate. You must do corporate. You must follow the next step, become an assistant audit manager, or become an FM, or do the generic positions. It was a little bit scary. But yeah, I think what carried me through to pursue that at Forte was just my passion. I think I just realized actually I loved tax, never struggled with tax through my studies. It just made sense. And to now remit what I actually know about it to others that are seeking to understand it was the best combination I could ever wish for. And yeah, I never looked back. And then, yeah, my career progressed. Yeah, Forte, people always ask me why Forte. The reason was that I just needed, I wanted to start my academic career where at a previously disadvantaged institution, because with less resources, you actually learn how to actually get the work done without compromising quality. And that was my fear. And I kind of got that lesson from the Auditor General, which I must actually give a shout out to, because they've actually given me the opportunity to be where I am. But within that space, within auditing the public sector, I actually learned a lot that, not everything is perfect. And sometimes people actually look to you to try and manipulate certain stuff that no one has had the opportunity to tell them how they actually look like. So I carried that into my to the Forte space. And yeah, coming back to Gauteng was a thing of, to put it simply, I just missed home. I just wanted to come home. I'm from Pretoria, like I said, I'm from Pretoria, Gauteng. So I think being there for close to 2 years was a thing of, I actually missed home. And I just started searching. But it's weird how my academic career panned out. Because I had experienced the degree space, I wanted to experience the diploma space, because that's where now you work quite a bit because of the type of students that you get and the amount of work that you actually have to invest in yourself as a lecturer before even attempting to invest any amount of hours in your student. So UJ gave me the opportunity. I stayed there for 2 years, close to 2 years. Again, I learned quite a bit, and it was just so interesting to move away from the mainstream of, you need to be a CA, you need to be a CA. Now you're talking with people who actually tell you that I'm actually not interested in being a CA. I want to work within the finance space. Can you advise me on what route I need to follow? And that, for me, it was a personal development thing in my career. That was a thing of, I needed to challenge myself because I've dealt with a historically disadvantaged institution. I know how to work with less resources. Um, University of Johannesburg, the Soweto campus, it's a different type of students. The resources are there, but it's a different type of student. And Wits is more of the caliber of student and the caliber of your colleagues. It's very, sometimes it can be difficult, it can be daunting. I found it daunting in a couple of months, but I think the close to 2 years that I've spent there actually proved to myself that I actually belong in the space and I actually have a seat at the table. Fantastic experience I've had at Wits. I've been challenged to the brim. I know before they changed their logo, I know we used to joke with some of my colleagues that, Wits puts you over the edge. And it's not just for the student, but also for the academics that you're always on edge. You have to know you can't stand in front of a class, you can't stand in front of your colleagues, you can't supervise a student if you don't know the ins and outs of what you're talking about. And obviously learning certain stuff of how to cope under pressure. And yeah, I mean, IE was a thing of varsity college, was a thing of, to be quite honest, I didn't apply for the job. I was just scouted for it. And my current boss now just decided to tell me, listen, let's have a conversation and see if you're interested in this role of being a deputy head. And I think what attracted me to being involved in such an environment was the leadership, the academic leadership, because I didn't want to be stuck in a situation where I'm always a senior lecturer. I'm always a senior lecturer, but there needs to be something, that you could add to the table. And again, working within a different environment where now it's you dealing, it's in a private space, so it's private education. Now, how do you deal with that? It's almost like on a customer relationship basis. And yeah, that's been my journey in a nutshell. I could say a lot more, but yeah.
Okay. And I mean, I love listening to the story, but outside of work, who are we on the weekends?
Outside of work, to be quite honest, so I'm an introvert by nature, all right, and I only keep a small group of people. Outside of work, listen, you'll find me as either I hang around with my close friends, so I like visiting some of my friends, two, three, four close my friends. If I'm not doing that, you will find me just chilling by myself, which I regularly do a lot. Just having a drink by myself, and I'm not depressed. I'm not doing anything. I just like the downtime, just being by myself. And then outside of that, I sometimes have a very, very hard addiction of playing FIFA on my Xbox. So I just have to now call myself into order that, hey, it's 4 a.m. Go to bed.
Can see you don't have a lot of kids yet because then
No,
there
no,
won't
no,
be time
no,
for FIFA. So
not yet. I'm not ready for those munchkins.
You mentioned it a little bit, but something that I want to touch on, and this is a bit of a long question, is, I mean, you
Yeah,
didn't take the normal route to lecturing. Most people who are lecturers, they
yeah,
maybe do academic articles, and then as soon as articles are done, they go straight back to academia.
yeah.
But you did the full 3 years at the AG, then you stayed on as a manager, then you moved to the learning and development department. So, I mean, you did it a little bit differently. And then
Mhm.
another thing that you also did a little differently is that I noticed that at two of your universities, you lectured in tax. And then
Mm.
at one of the other universities, you lectured in cost and financial management.
Yeah,
And now you're head of finance and accounting. Like most lecturers that I've spoken to, they specialize, like, I like tax, and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
yeah.
Whereas you've experimented a little bit, and so talk to us a little bit about this, doing things differently.
Um, I think for starters, I must actually pay homage to my parents because my parents were most of the time risk takers, especially my dad that had the whole idea of, if something is really not working, leave the room and find another room to go challenge yourself. I took that and ran with it. But additionally, I think I'm always afraid of being in a rut professionally. And how I identify that is if I'm not learning, if there's nothing new that I'm learning, um, yeah, I just automatically feel that I think it's time to leave. So I think the whole experimental element of it was, obviously tax is my bread and butter. I love tax. The whole element, interesting enough, moving to UJ and ending up in the math space, cost and financial management, was there were already too many tax lecturers. And at the time, my boss was like, listen, you're going to have to make a choice. It's either auditing or financial management. And on the spot, I said, hell no, I'm not going to auditing because I just don't find it interesting. It doesn't excite me. I will struggle even to lecture it. So custom financial management was the one. And yeah, I have this thing of, especially when a challenge professionally comes on my desk, I have this thing of, okay, you have a 30 seconds. In my mind, I'll tell you have 30 seconds or a minute to panic, do everything, panic, panic, panic. And then once you're done with that, then I come back to myself and say, listen, I actually have the skill, I have the knowledge, I have the experience to see what actually needs to be done. And that's my whole career, because I just don't, I think, and I do agree with you with most of the academics, is that we want to specialize. But I've met quite a few people that I actually had chats with where they've actually, to some degree, have lectured all four modules. And that for me was interesting to say, okay, I see that you are a auditing specialist, but you've done the other modules. And I would ask why. And for them, it was about, I didn't want to be in a rut. I needed to know what's actually happening in another discipline so that it actually enhances my teaching philosophy, it enhances my career as a person. And yeah, that's, I think, my entire career actually. That's what I've modeled under, that I just didn't want to be too comfortable. As soon as I feel comfortable, I actually leave.
For the audience, we'll be responding to questions towards the end. So please add your questions to the comment section now so that we don't miss them. Um, so I found something quite interesting is you studied at the University of Pretoria, UNISA,
Yeah.
Rhodes. Are you doing something at Rhodes? You lectured at Wits, UJ, Fort Hare. If we add your current role, you're probably one of probably a handful of people in South Africa who had experience at 7 higher education institutions in South
Yeah,
Africa.
yeah.
I mean, what's your opinion on the state of the tertiary education and even the accounting education in South Africa?
Sure. I think if I can take it back to when I studied at the University of Pretoria, um, you obviously get to meet. Actually, let me scrap that. What I actually think is that I think my entire experience has actually taught me that the tertiary space is almost like a business. We don't realize it, but each institution actually has its own target market. It may not be communicated, but the more I actually walked the lecture halls, the more I interacted with students, you kind of identify the trend, the commonalities of the students that you're teaching. So when I studied at University of Pretoria, more often than not, you find that we are majority middle class students. Our parents, your mom is either a nurse or a some government official, or your mom even works for the institution, but there's that work ethic, that comes with it, that you can't leave this university without something else. With UNISA, it was a little bit more of an interesting element because you could be writing a test and you're sitting next to a 50-year-old who's gone through the mills of life and the highs and lows of lives, and then you're sitting next to someone else who is your age, or you're sitting someone next to someone else who's completely younger than you. So you kind of find these pockets of spaces where there's multiple groups that you can actually fit into, Whereas when I studied at the University of Pretoria, it's that if you actually miss that first year, not studying in that particular institution, you kind of will struggle if you're not if you're not a people's person. I mean, that was from a student perspective. And then lecturing, I think when I went to the University of Fort Hare, I actually found that you're dealing with, first of all, very intelligent kids. And intelligent from the perspective of just because they did not make it in other higher institutions that are well prized or that are well dominated or advertised, they have taught themselves more or less. They come from schools where someone actually had to teach themselves accounting or maths or English. It may not be perfect, but the fact that they actually managed to get a 55, if not a 60, I always look at it from a perspective, if they went to the high affluent schools, this is a straight A student because of the support. So it was I kind of enjoyed the student interaction at Forte because the students actually work hard. They work hard. They take your advice. Very humble beginnings. They don't have much to fall back on. So it's also a pressurized environment where it feels for me, I felt more as a lecturer that I hold this person's future in my hands. So, let me actually help them. With you, Jay, it was a little bit of both. You find someone who come from a well-off family or to do well family, and then some that are not well off. So you kind of have to structure the way that you communicate with them or structure the way that you actually help them. Someone else, for example, is obsessed with passing, just passing, and that's all they need. And someone else is obsessed with, I need to get a particular average to maintain my funding because there's nothing at home. So it was that kind of an environment. I think when I went at Wits, I must say that when I was at Wits, you find the most challenging students from every front. And I liked that challenging. It was uncomfortable, obviously, in a couple of few months, but challenging from a perspective of they are not, they're just not going to take what you tell them, what you say. They're going to question left, right, and center. And the interesting that I found at Wits, it's I thought it would be almost like mostly of the white students would do that. But you actually found it in the other groups, the Indians, the colored people, the black people, where they actually genuinely challenge. And I decided earlier on that I could look at this as a negative, or I could look at this as a positive to develop myself and genuinely, authentically interact with the students. With I is more of it's private, so you're dealing with majority of the well-off students. You're dealing with parents that more or less want to make sure that their kids are in a comfortable place, because there is this added thing of we do something different than the public space. So I think in general, just to sum it up, I just honestly think that each and every single university has its own target market. May not be advertised, but you generally see it a lot in the type of students that you deal with. And me as an academic and even as a student, it kind of shapes the way that you have to communicate as a student. As a lecturer, it changes the way that you teach. Your teaching philosophy completely changes. I mean, an example is I teach tax. I can't go to my IE students and explain the nuts and bolts of trust. They're already aware of it because their parents are well off. But in another institution, you kind of have to unpack it as to say, this is the basis of what a trust aims to do. And this is why we have these rules. Yeah, that's what I think about the education landscape, particularly in accounting.
Okay, I mean, that gives us a good idea. Just to follow on is that, I mean, some people have a bit of a negative perception of maybe doing articles at the Auditor General. But I mean, you completed your articles there. You stayed on as a manager for a few years, so that doesn't scream negative perception in my mind. So, what
Yeah.
is your opinion of your Auditor General experience?
First of all, fantastic. Fantastic environment to train in. Um, so my perception is that, and that certainly when I trained was that, um, to train anywhere else and to have to deal with these clients, everything is perfect. And for me, that did not sit well with me in a sense that, well, if everything is perfect, what is there to learn personally because of how my mind is? Where in the Auditor General space, yes, at the time things were not perfect with a couple of clients, but I saw it as an opportunity where you learn things that your university degree cannot give you. So, in that way, you learn certain skills that, first of all, your university does not confer, and another firm cannot teach you. So, an example would be, if I'm in the normal audit firms, I would be exposed to one accounting framework, and IFRS for my studies. But the Auditors General opened my mind in a sense that, hold on, you may have to understand the type of client that you deal with, because there's three different accounting frameworks. And one of those is that, one of the things is that obviously now you're going to have to go and read up and see, okay, what component am I actually auditing? Okay, I'm auditing a department, so it's on a cash basis. So I'm going to have to now learn that accounting framework and learn the implications of it. And that's what I enjoyed, over and above having to learn what a normal university degree does and, shapes you more or less to what a normal audit firm or a normal firm actually does. So I think, for me, doing articles in the AG was a blessing in disguise, in a sense that I think, you learn, first of all, the art of audit, what auditing actually is, and how it actually looks like. You learn the art of communication. You learn the art of, research. You learn the art of even teaching, the people that you're actually auditing. You learn the art of actually defending some of the findings that you find, in front of, people that I felt that you would not necessarily have access to in other firms, like your CEO. I mean, I could remember one of the audit clients that I've audited. Obviously, I won't divulge the information, but I was sent by my audit manager, and I was auditing employee benefits, and found some irregularities, with the CFO's salary. And my manager just, stared at me blankly and say, "What do you want to do? Because this is your component. I need to hear from you. You've been blabbering all along about employees tax and giving me the accounting treatments. What's the difference between in a, public entity versus a full IFRS, client, and all of that? What do you want to do?" And that for me taught me that, okay, I need to go research. And then she came back and she's like, "Okay, I get what you need to do. That's academic. I want you to go and walk into the CFO's role, office, and ask the pay slips for the past 6 months, his pay slips." And that for me was a thing of, "Phew, how do I, as a second year trainee, how do I approach someone else and say, hey, may I have a chat with you? This is what I'm going to request, just heads up and everything else." And that for me was an interesting thing, where when I asked her in Heinz afterwards, after the audit, and she's like, "I needed you to learn how to communicate with someone not at your level, and someone even not at your boss's level. That's what I want you to take away from this, because that's what the Auditor General actually aims to do, because you are going to be confronted with such things, and you need to walk away with that skill." So yeah, I think, in hindsight, I think the Auditor General is, I think obviously the landscape is changing quite a bit. I see it with some of my students that are more interested in actually going into the public sector. But I think back then it was more of, if you did not make it in the other firms, or the other firms could not give you a space, you almost like a, the the black sheep of the corporate world almost. But I think in hindsight, it actually taught me a whole lot more that I don't think I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else.
That's a great advertisement for the agent. Something that I didn't know. It sounds like you had good leadership there.
Yeah.
I want to switch over a little bit to questions from the audience because some of them are coming through. We've got a question from Serame who says, "How do you keep learning in an environment where it's too busy with things like long hours, and how can you balance it out?" I think it touches on when you mentioned when you stop learning, you no
Yeah.
longer want to be at that organization.
Um, to answer the question, I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think you just need to understand yourself. Um, First of all, I believe that I kind of got away with the whole thing that I'm one of those people that don't believe balance exists. If you really want to learn something or you want to do something, you would actually make it work. So what I do, for example, is well, how I continue learning is in preparing for my lectures, for example. I don't just go through the material and say, oh, this is what it is, this is what it is. I actually treat it as if I'm a student. I keep learning. What I do as well is that I sometimes have to listen to certain podcasts when I drive to work, just to learn something else that I don't know. It may not be related to my module or everything else. I just come up with ways of how I need to learn. And what I've done is that I think also involving myself in certain projects, that's a way for me to kill two birds with one stone because I'm doing the work, but at the same time I'm learning. So
That's
it's
a
not
good one.
just about
That's a good
it's not
one.
just yeah. So that's what I do.
And you have to put yourself out there. You can't just
Yeah,
wait for things to come. You have to
yeah,
ask when you put yourself
yeah,
into that.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
a great one. There's a question that somebody sent me before the interview, actually from Lisa, who says, "What does a deputy head of school actually do? Like, what does the life of a deputy head of school look like?"
Um, it depends on an institution, right? So for where I am, I primarily look after the CTA program because of how our institution is structured, because we spread over 6 campuses and CTA is over 2 campuses. And when I joined, and the reason why my boss scouted me was that she was heavily looking under the undergrad space, where it's spread over 6 campuses, and she just needed someone to head basically the postgraduate space, and understandably so because there's a lot more work that goes into undergrad. So my typical tasks include obviously managing my CTA lecturers, managing the academic trainees, which we primarily use for the CTA space because of the unique nature of where our campuses are structured. And then the other stuff includes obviously research. Um, it also includes looking after certain program managers. Certain program managers, basically where a program manager is sitting on a campus. So I need to find out, is everything still going as it should be in that particular campus? And obviously guarding against losing our accreditation or keeping our accreditation intact for CTA, and that's how my role primarily includes as a deputy head.
Okay. And a last question from Refilwe, who says, "You mentioned that you diverted into the diploma space from the degree space during lecturing. What were some of the difficulties you faced during that phase, and how different was it?"
Um, Look, the difficulties that I experience is having to adjust how I teach. I had been used at that point in time with interacting with a degree student, which you find them at a particular level. Their level of comprehension is a little bit higher than that you find in a diploma space. So the challenge for me that I had to find was adjusting my teaching philosophy and toning it down a bit. Assessment wise, I know I'm always accused of this in some of the institution that my assessments can be a little bit harder. I'd like to be more innovative. I kind of had to adjust that, not compromising quality though, but still challenging them, but understanding their limitations. I think the biggest challenge for me was just adjusting having to teach a diploma student where with a degree student we move at like 120 kilometers per hour, for example, where with a diploma student I kind of had to tone it down to like a 90 or 100 so that at least they can catch on.
And that explains it. I think that's all questions that we have. Any last few words from you or anything we didn't discuss that you'd like the audience to know?
Yeah, I think for me in this career, make it work for you. I think that's what I think with the CA title or this accounting qualification. Make it work for you. I also understand that I think a lot of what I've seen, certainly in my space with my students, is that, and some of the people that I'm mentoring in their articles, the moment that they qualify, it's they don't really know what to do with themselves. And
Now,
what now? Like, what do I need to do? I think one of the things that I can encourage if you are training, start thinking about already what is your passion. You know, it's okay to do something different out of the norm. You know, it's completely okay, and be comfortable with that. And I think my last parting words is don't chase money or titles. I think once you find your passion and find your space, the money and the titles will actually follow, where you kind of have to now decline opportunities, not necessarily take on. So I would say dare to be different, and think about post the CASA designation.
I think that's a great way to end. The show has been live on YouTube and should be available on podcast by tomorrow. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast and you feel that it's added value, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on that notification bell to get automatically notified when the next episode comes out. Katlego, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us for another episode of Two Ways to Skin a Cat. Goodbye.